Welcome, everybody. Adriane Lau here with RE/MAX. I am joined today with Robyn Berg from Union Home Mortgage. And I have to admit that when we started advertising this a month ago, we totally missed the fact that the inauguration starts exactly right now. So hopefully you're watching this on a replay. We'll put it out there so that you can see it later if you want to enjoy the inauguration. But anyway, we know that a lot of people start thinking about buying a home as we come into the new year and you're thinking about your goals. And if you are a first-time buyer, if you have the goal of buying a new home in 2021, we want to talk you through the process a little bit and specifically about some of the mistakes that we see people making, which financing is a big one of those. So that's why I've asked Robyn to join us today so she can take you a little bit through the mortgage process. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see some of the things as we talk about them. So first, I just want to talk about the broad scope, the home buying process in general. The first step is to get that pre-approval. If you're using a mortgage, most first-time buyers are not paying cash, obviously. And this is important for so many reasons. Robyn's going to touch on that in just a minute. But of course, that lets you know what price range to look in, what type of homes to look at. The second step is to find your real estate agent. Some people don't realize this, but there are actually two different types of real estate agents: agents working for the seller and agents working for the buyer. So as a buyer, you get to have your own representation, which we always recommend. That's the person on your team telling you, is the price fair, learning what your likes and dislikes are, learning the areas, and then hopefully making some helpful suggestions as you go through the process of looking. Step 3, which is the fun part. This is the part we all want to focus on and think about: finding your home. And I always tell people that this step can take a week or it can take a year. It just depends on what you need to feel comfortable in making your decision. I would say the average number of houses people look at is probably 10 to 15, but we've had people look at 70 and we've had people look at 1. So like I said, whatever you need to feel comfortable with the pricing and the decision that you're making. It's a really big decision, obviously. It's important to take the time that you need. After you get a contract accepted, and let me talk a little bit about a couple things in our current market that are relevant. It, unfortunately, if you're thinking about buying, is a seller's market right now, which means that there's not a lot of inventory on the market, and the stuff that's coming up is moving really quickly off the market. Don't let that depress you. It doesn't mean you can't buy a house. It just means that you need to work with your agent to talk about some strategies to make your offer the most competitive. We've had a number of people that they have to put in 3 or 4 offers before they get one accepted in the last year or so. But once you actually do go under contract, so the seller has agreed that you are going to be the buyer of the home, we will work to get the home inspection scheduled. You're going to want to budget $500 to $700 for the inspections, depending on exactly what you want to have inspected. And if you put the inspection in as a contingency in the offer, which most people do, it means that if the inspections go really bad, you don't have to buy the house. Or maybe you find something, there's termites, there's radon, some of these things that you just can't tell when you walk through a house. You can always go back to the seller and ask them to address those issues before you move forward. So the next thing that happens is we hand it over to the lender and they start the mortgage process. The first thing that happens is the appraisal, and you will pay for the appraisal up front, which is typically about $500. And that's, of course, to have a third party come in and assess the value, make sure that the price you're paying for the house is a fair price in today's marketplace. And then after that, it goes to the underwriters. And this is where they collect all your income and asset documentation and all that. And then we can close. So from the time you go under contract to actually closing, it usually takes about 6 weeks. But remember that sometimes you're buying a house that's occupied and maybe the seller needs to stay in the house a little bit afterward. So, you might want to start looking 4 to 5 months before you actually want to make a move to not, get too tight on your timeframes, depending on your situation. So I'm going to toss it over to Robyn next, and she's going to talk about the biggest mistake people make, which is in regards to financing. So Robyn, take it away.
Thank you, Adriane. So mistake number 1 is not being pre-approved or trusting the payment listed on Zillow. So sorry about that.
Real life. People are calling.
We're live, it's business. So anyway, back to my topic. So the point of being pre-approved is that this scenario happens all the time. Buyers call myself or Adriane. Oftentimes they start with Adriane instead of my side, and they'll call and ask to see a home they possibly have seen on Zillow. It hits all their boxes, and they're comfortable with the monthly payment they've seen on Zillow. They're ready to go look. Adriane's team will ask, have you been pre-approved? Let's start the process. And then once they speak with a lender like myself, I unfortunately have to inform them that payment was very wrong. It doesn't meet their budget. It's well over what they wanted to pay for monthly. And then we have to kind of backtrack. And that's not a good position to be in. Neither of us want to have that conversation and disappoint a buyer. So our goal is for you to be prepared and to start that pre-approval process before you even start looking at homes online. Ideally, you want to know what range to look in so that you're not getting discouraged. So a pre-approval, in my opinion, is like a financial snapshot of where you're at right now. We look at three things. We look at credit, income, and assets. And those three things are really going to determine what your program options are, what financing options we can offer, what your down payment looks like. And all of those things are going to factor into the monthly payment. So the reason I may not agree with the Zillow payment is because Zillow is a one-size-fits-all. They're not looking at specific programs. They're assuming everyone has an 800 credit score, which most people don't have. They're assuming 20% down, which most people don't have. And they're assuming one conventional program. So with all of the options that we have out there, you really need to determine which one is best for you with your lender based on your budget and your credit score and what form of down payment you're comfortable putting down. Once we have all of that information, then we can evaluate the proper payment with the correct interest rate for your program and credit score. If there is private mortgage insurance that we need to factor into that payment, or a funding fee for a government program. So that's the important part of talking to the lender and making sure that you meet the parameters that you're trying to meet for your financial goals. If you don't have a budget in mind and you're not sure where you're comfortable with a monthly payment, we'll be able to help you determine that by looking at your monthly debts that filter in from the credit and your income, and we'll be able to run some scenarios and see where you're most comfortable once you hear what those payments might be. The next thing we do once we get to that point is we issue an actual letter, the pre-approval letter, that we'll send out to you and your realtor. Once Adriane has that in her file, she's now prepared. If you do want to make an offer on any home, she has that letter ready to show the seller that you are a prepared buyer and you're able to finance that home. You've done your due diligence. In a case where you're up against multiple bids, sometimes multiple offers coming in on the same house, she just mentioned the competitive market we're in right now. You need to be prepared. In the case of if you wanted to write an offer on a home and you did not have that letter, now she's unable to put in your offer. And while you're scrambling around, possibly on an evening or a weekend, trying to get your letter last minute, trying to make these financial decisions of what you're comfortable with, in the meantime, another buyer could come in that is pre-approved and scoop up that house. By the time you can get your letter around, it's already gone. So we don't want that to happen. We want you to have that experience where if you like a house and you want to write an offer, Adriane and her team can put that in and start your negotiations right away with a strong competitive offer. The last thing is looking at the type of property and your financing type. So specifically, this goes to more government financing. There's three types: FHA, VA, and rural housing that are all government. There is one specific thing that really kind of gets a lot of people. That happens to be an example of flaking and peeling paint. So for example, if you have a home that has a little bit of flaking or peeling paint around a window or a door or porch, that's not a deal breaker. You can pretty much look at all those homes just fine. But if you have a home that requires a complete redo of all of the paint on the exterior, that could be thousands of dollars. We're in the middle of winter. That's quite cumbersome for a seller. So in that case, they may not even list your type of financing as a type that they're willing to accept. Adriane and her team are going to know that if you have a pre-approval letter stating your type of financing, and they're not going to show you those homes. Or if you do want to see a home, they're going to explain to you and be able to have you understand why that's not a good fit for your type of financing. So it's all about being prepared and being empowered to make a competitive offer in this market and being ready to go, knowing your numbers for down payment, monthly payment, and your price range. If you're interested in getting pre-approved or setting up a buyer consultation with both of us, just let us know and our contact information will be on the link at the end.
Yes, absolutely. And we've been doing a lot of buyer consultations just like this on Zoom, just obviously for safety. And we can go through the specifics of your situation and make sure we're getting you into the best mortgage program and, best fit for your situation. So thank you very much, Robyn. I appreciate all that information. I'm going to jump back over to our slideshow here and talk about a couple other common mistakes that we see. You heard me reference at the beginning that there are different types of agents, and there's no reason to not hire a buyer's agent, you guys. You got to have someone in your corner. If you go through an open house and write an offer with the listing agent, they only represent the seller. Their job is to get the seller the best and highest offer that they can on the property. But as we talked about earlier, a buyer's agent is looking out for your interest. Now, a lot of times people say, well, I don't have money to pay the buyer's agent, and it's included in the purchase price. So what happens is the seller agrees to pay a commission, and then the seller's agent says, well, I'd love to sell this house, but I get nothing if I don't sell it at all. So let me offer half of the commission to anybody who can bring a buyer through the property. So that's kind of how it flows. It's a little bit confusing, and sometimes people don't like to ask because it's awkward, but it's not awkward. Just ask. We're here to help and educate. Number 3, this one was a suggestion that our agent Race added, because he's seen so many cases where somebody loves the kitchen, or the colors, or some of these sort of superficial but still important details, and they're not thinking about the half an hour commute to work and the no internet for people that are working. I have so many people now that are working from home, and maybe they want to be on 10 acres, but like you've got DSL or, a hotspot to work from. Maybe that's not going to work for your situation. So it's important to think about the daily factors as well. Another mistake that I see is people waiting until the inspections to negotiate a big ticket item, meaning I pull up in front of a house, I can tell that roof needs to be replaced. It's, crinkled up and leaking into the living room. Well, let's go ahead and negotiate that up front, because if you're not going to be able to get through that obstacle with the seller, maybe don't spend $700 on an inspection to find that out. We know it's there. Let's negotiate it today. And maybe for the smaller things, it might be different, like, oh, the garbage disposal doesn't work, or it needs a GFI outlet. Those are surmountable. But these big ticket items that can be thousands of dollars and tricky to find a contractor right now with how everything is, it's important to think about. Oh, this is the biggest one. This can cause the most frustration for people in the process. When you write that offer, you're going to put in your closing date and just put it in pencil, because I would say 90% of the time we're not closing that day. You might have a delay because something comes up at the inspection, or you have an appraisal issue, or underwriting takes a little bit longer than it should. It won't with Robyn, but
Thank you. I agree with this one 100%.
So once we call them the magic words, once we hear the words clear to close, that means that they are ready to fund that loan. We can schedule the closing, and you can start talking about moving trucks and getting family into town to help and all that sort of thing. But it is definitely something that changes quite a bit. So be a little bit careful with that one. So hopefully we were able to provide you guys with some helpful information today, especially if you're just starting the process for the first time. We know it can be overwhelming, and we're here to help. It's our passion. And I do have our contact information included in the link. Usually I think it's above, maybe it's below, I can't tell. So feel free to shoot us a message. We'd love to schedule a private consultation with you to talk about the specifics of your situation. So have a good day, everyone.